We're working towards moving to the ice lake we saw on reconnaissance and getting our mobile base loaded and ready for travel. I've been gathering up more precious resources like gold and silver and stockpiling some ingots, because when I get there, I'll need to set up a wind turbine farm for electricity immediately. But before I leave, I want to have a couple working ships to get the job done, a scout ship and a welder. And not to provide a spoiler, but the carrier ship almost didn't make it. So let's take a look at all that. In addition to gathering resources, I needed a scout ship, and there were a couple of reasons. Once I moved to the ice lake, I wanted to start making regular trips to that ENAT station to complete some of the simpler acquisition missions and to do the search missions. A little light scout ship would be perfect for that. I could start building reputation with that faction and learn what kind of game things it might open, and get some space credits to purchase a ship, or maybe even acquire some uranium at one of the other stations. I don't know if the other stations would even sell that, but I was going to find out.
Yes, I do. Every time.
And needed some money to be prepared. The other reason I needed a scout ship was that the ice lake was set in some rather rugged territory. The original base was actually pretty posh, with lots of different resources and flat open lands that were easily traveled by rover. Not so much with the new location. I was still going to use the rover as my miner, but travel would be more challenging, and a scout ship was almost a must for alternative transportation. Now, against normal conventions, the very first ship I built in the game was the giant rover carrier ship. Most folks would have worked their way up from smaller ships to bigger ones, so I was kind of doing things in reverse. But it was all good. I was just doing what I wanted to do. The scout ship would be small grid, and I decided right from the beginning to use the connector for hooking this small ship to the big ship. Even though there are small grid and large grid connector variants, the actual part of each one that connects together is the same size. So in many ways, the connector is the easier way of attaching small grid to large grid things. However, the small grid connector is kind of a larger block. It's sort of chunky in my opinion, so it can be a little obtrusive, but it's what I went with. Building it was like any other ship. Start with the connector to establish it as its own grid, add a medium-sized container to be able to move a few goods, a cockpit, and a couple batteries, add thrusters for each direction, mix thoroughly according to the directions on the label, and voila, a scout ship. I also decided to try to armor the outside of this, not so much because it needed it, but I wanted it to look nicer than just having the interior guts exposed. And I was starting to learn just a little glimpse of how to build better ships, with one lesson being to try to build them maybe more from the inside out, starting with the essential components of the build and then adding on more decorative or protective blocks last. Maybe that was better. I don't know, but this one turned out pretty decent. Kinda tall and narrow, and with the blue and white paint scheme, kinda reminded me of a little US postal mail truck. Almost immediately, I ran into issues though. The landing gear were too close together to fit over the sides of the connector I had. I wanted the gear to fit over the protruding connector, so after a little rework, it did fit. Maybe not the best setup, but I liked the idea of having the little ship hanging off the back like a fly. Now, I'm a noob, I admit it, and somewhere in my fiddling with things, I decided to set the batteries to recharge, which kill the power to the connector, and yeah. Well, at least I survived, and I was kinda sure I wasn't alone in failed attempts in Space Engineers, so it was back to the construction pad for another go. And I was actually able to salvage the husk that was left behind and build it back up. But now I'd go for a safer top docking attachment. No more fly. Now, all this scout building was happening at the same time as me tinkering with the rover and the merge blocks you saw in the last episode. And during one of those test flights, I somehow lost the scout ship off the back. At the time, I had no idea when or where it had come off, and looked around for a bit, but it could have been anywhere within a 10-kilometer radius. I completely gave up trying to find that wreckage. So I just built another one. And this time though, I used the Projector and rebuilt the Scout from a saved blueprint I'd made. Now, I'd love to make this video about how to use the Projector. It's super cool, but it has a lot of extensions into other things to really use it, like about the blueprints, and the setup of the Projector, and different welding approaches once it's projected. And to be fair, it should get its own video, because it has all those complexities. And I do want to use the Projector in multiple situations, so I can give it a fair shakedown on its use. I could tell a one-time use wasn't going to give me enough exposure to do it justice. And if I'm going to give information in a video, I do want it to be at least reasonably well informed. So the Scout was rebuilt, but in a bit of nostalgia and due to the miracle of video capture, I was going back through some footage and just happened to catch the loss of the rover from the back of the big ship during one of my test flights. Now that is definitely a moment of instant replay.
That is definitely a moment of instant replay.
Today when you watch a game, you couldn't think of watching without the instant replay. It goes hand in hand.
This allowed me to find the wreckage of the original Scout ship, and it wasn't too bad off. I thought it would just be in little tiny pieces, and I was able to get it back to the base for repairs. But what would I do with 2 Scout ships? Well, I didn't need 2, but what I did want to have is a welding ship to take with me to help aid in the construction of the wind turbine farm I'd need for power at the new base. Sure, I could do it by hand, but why when you could build a cool ship to do it? More than it just being cool though, if I built it well enough, it should be able to hold about 10 to 15 times as much building material as I could carry by hand, with standard server settings anyway, and just make the whole process much faster and easier. Now I will fast forward you a bit and tell you that both the Scout and Welder ships got multiple incremental makeovers with more batteries for longer flight times, bigger and more engines for greater lift, particularly on the Welder ship, some mag plates instead of landing gear. But in the end, I was really happy with my matching pair of small grid vessels, and I really think they speak to their designated functions. The Scout ship is small, compact, and fairly trim, while the Welder has more of an industrial and beefier look to it. Still relatively compact, but definitely looks like it has more muscle for its heavier duty workload. So, with both small ships built and the big carrier loaded up with as much ore as I dared carry, it was off to the new ice lake. I'll admit that I pushed the weight of the carrying capacity of that big ship about as far as I should. Maybe a bit farther, because for reasons I'm still unsure of, I ran aground, crossing over the top of the last mountain range. Fortunately, I only lost one of my landing gear, and with the rest of the gear turned on, it allowed the ship to stick to the terrain and hold it in place while I did a couple quick repairs. Our journey though was successful, and a good learning experience as I realized I clearly needed more engine power on this mobile base, and also needed to start working on adding hydrogen thrusters for more lift and maneuverability. The small thrusters just weren't gonna cut it for a ship this big carrying this much mass. But first, the new power station needed to get built, and I needed to start building reputation and money with the faction at the ENAT station, and get more coordinates of other stations, and the list goes on. Watch the next episode and see the advancements. Like and subscribe so you don't miss it, and I'll be talking to you later.